So I brought along Alan to talk about some fun stuff. We could look at my compiling code that can, oh, this is a whole other thing. When your code compiles, but it doesn't actually work. That's
That
more
happens.
of my world. Yeah.
That's Android. That's Android. Let's blame Android. We've already been over this.
Yeah. So Alan and me are big fans of iOS, but we have our hoops to jump through sometimes. So we'll get to Shiny in just a second, but before that, this episode of .NET Dev Show is proudly brought together by the folks over at Visual Studio Live. They put together wonderful developer events all throughout the year and all throughout the country. If you're in the Americas, they have lots of virtual things as well. You'll see, hands-on learning experiences all throughout the year. But the real fun is when you come and join events that are in person. The next one that's coming up is in Windy City. This is in Chicago, end of April. Springtime should be really beautiful. And it's like, every one of their shows is like a full week-long thing. So you get to, take the time to sit down, do some workshops, and then I have been an attendee many times. I've been a speaker many times. So it's really a good show if you want to stay on top of all things .NET ecosystem and so on. So if you look at Chicago, every show has a ton of great speakers and wonderful content, AI, .NET, anything that you can think of. Without this guy. But everybody else is going to be really good. So come and join us in Chicago. If that doesn't work for you, the next thing that's coming up is in Microsoft HQ. This is in Redmond, coming up in early August, which should also be really nice over in the Pacific Northwest. And then they circle back down to Orlando towards the end of the year for the biggest show. This is coming up in November. And we have a quick promo here for all of you folks watching the .NET Dev Show. Here's a little code for you. So if you use that code, you get hefty part off from your in-person event tickets. So come and join if your time and budget permits in Chicago or Redmond or Orlando, and we'll see you there. Alan, let's get your desktop up here. All right, we have your Mac desktop, but give us maybe a high level of what is Shiny in the first place.
So Shiny is kind of like a conglomerate of plugins that I've been doing over the years. And its main focal point has always been kind of more the hardware. It's not the UI. I know that the name makes it sound kind of like it's UI focused, but it is not at all. That's actually the play. It's more a joke in that not all Shiny things have to be UI focused or customer centric. So what Shiny is the ability to do things in the background or do things with the hardware, such as like Bluetooth, or GPS. That's another big one that we have. It also does stuff like push notifications and a whole whack of other things. But basically, its premise was to be designed outside of kind of the MAUI atmosphere, outside of Xamarin Forms, and really work with the .NET Mobile. So if you're doing .NET Mobile in native or some of the other infrastructures like Uno, it'll kind of plug in. Yep. So a lot of people have tended to ask me, why do you have your own permissions? Why don't you use Essentials? Or why do you have this and not use MAUI Essentials? Well, because of that fact. And Shiny did have a lot of these things before Essentials existed. So it continues to kind of run as its own thing.
Yeah, nice. So hold that thought for just 1 second, Alan, and maybe you can pull up a browser and kind of show us where people can get more information on Shiny, like where do we get started. But looking at the chat room here, Nepam, sorry, there are companies have different travel restrictions, but there are virtual things where you can come and hang out with us here. That's always an option, but in person you get a lot more networking, for sure. So I hear you. Expense reports, if you can, then that would be nice. And who's this gentleman here? You know him, Alan?
There we go. Yeah, I told John to come and troll, so I knew he was going to be coming along.
John,
Windows support.
John, good to see you. So actually, since John is here, Alan, do you want to talk about Gone Mobile for a second?
Yeah, that's a podcast I run weekly with Jonathan Dick over at Microsoft. He's our lovely .NET engineering manager. I'm not allowed to make Windows jokes, John. You know that. So I won't for Sam's benefit, but he knows my love of Windows. So Shiny does not support Windows, but it may come at some point only because of other things pushing me. I am focused mainly on iOS, Android, and possibly WebAssembly in the near future.
Yep, I hear you. Some folks here run their own gig, like Lindell. Yeah, experiment reporting becomes a little bit easier, but it comes with its own challenges of responsibility of running your own show. But good for you. All right, so how long have you run Shiny?
Originally, it started with a whole bunch of plugins back in the early Xamarin days when we were kind of just kicking off. So I've been doing Xamarin stuff since 2012 when they kind of left Novell, when Miguel and crew
early
left.
days of mono iOS, mono Android.
And it was more proof of concept stuff for a company I was working with at the time to see, is there anything here, and kind of keep our finger on the pulse and see where it goes. Because cross-platform was basically only web at that day. And if you were doing a lot of web stuff back then, it was really slow. I mean, I used a product called Sencha Touch, and it
I remember that. Yeah.
Kind of worked. It was nice, but man, its animations would get stuck, and web was just kind of in a hard place at that point. So I was keeping my fingers on the Xamarin, Zimian, mono stuff at the time.
You're dating ourselves.
Yeah, it's all right.
These
I don't
name
mind.
drops.
It means I've seen it evolve. I've made the mistakes and kind of come out at the end of it. So it's the platform is there, right?
So you dropped a few things here. Let's maybe expand. So in the early days of Xamarin, you have to understand here, folks, we are trying to do .NET that, goes across platforms, and underneath it is all Java or, Swift or Objective-C. We don't want to get down to that level to write platform-specific things. So we have always been wanting to do abstractions. So in the early days of Xamarin, we had a whole, plugins ecosystem. Everybody wrote plugins. There were, 5 media plugins to do camera access. And then that got kind of streamlined into Xamarin Essentials, which is, one nuget.NET library, which gets you most of the APIs. And that became, .NET MAUI Essentials with the evolution. And now it's, so essential that it's not there anymore. It's just all baked in. But it's not everything, which is why, Shiny and other, libraries exist that lets you, do the low-level stuff. Did I say that all of that right? The history?
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So kind of going back when I had started, when Xamarin kind of started to take off, it was more around the PCL, or the portable class libraries. MVVM Cross was really big back then. It's still running. For those that know Tomas, Cheese Baron is what he goes by on Twitter. He's still running that project successfully. But they were really, the Stuart Lodge back in the day was really the guy that kind of started those plugins. And then they were kind of tiny at the time. Like, you couldn't do a lot in the background, and essentials or plugins back then were very tiny, right? Like, get me my current GPS coordinates, take a picture, simple things. And they needed to evolve as mobile was evolving. Things needed to catch up. So there was a lot of us at the time that kind of started to do these plugins, like James Montemagno, myself. I wrote this stupid user dialogues thing, which people still use today. I don't know why. It's old. It's like a dinosaur, but I don't even use it anymore. And I still get bugged to update it. So we kind of just evolved as we went along, and then we started plugging in Xamarin Forms. And then .NET MAUI came in, and there's Uno, and there's other platforms out there that are kind of all in the mix now. So we've evolved. So Shiny is kind of the evolution of all of that. It came out of a mass bajillion amounts of plugins that I had. And the problem with the plugins that I found was there was no good way to deal with life cycle, right? So I realize Maui has that now, but again, not being stuck to Maui, right? Being available to Uno and all those other platforms. I kind of needed to have my own permissions, my own repositories, my own, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we are today. And that's why I continue to run with it, and I continue to build my customers on the platform.
Yeah. And to your point, like, this stuff is not trivial. Like, when you build cross-platform apps, these are very different platforms. You're catering to the underlying SDKs, and APIs are always evolving. So it's always a challenge. Like Chatroom is saying, like, I mean, we have come a long way, like from the early Xamarin days of doing things outside of Microsoft, and then with the evolution, with the acquisition and then eventual evolution. Now, I mean, this is .NET. I mean, and be it Maui, be it Uno platform, I mean, you are just doing .NET, and you're taking it to places that it wasn't, initially intended to be. Now it's, business as usual, but there's a lot going on under the seams.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I see you got a V3 documentation that's under construction. So are you in V3, or is it something that's been worked on?
I'm in V3. I am looking at kind of moving to V4. Documentation's always under construction, though. Let's face it, it's open source, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a documentation builder. But I mean, this site, I've built it more around people kind of being able to get samples easy, people being able to generate their boilerplate, because that's a big thing, right? Like, not even Maui can save you from the sheer amounts of boilerplate that comes these days, or Uno. Same thing. You're not going to get away with it. So we've got stuff like the app builder. So this is shinylib.net. We've got stuff here that kind of allows you to pick your poison. So you can pick your periodic jobs, your GPS, etc. And it's going to start telling you, okay, these are the nugets you need. You can do this in your project file if you want. Here's what your Maui app program should look like.
Yeah, look at that. One extension method, use Shiny. And does that wire up everything pretty much?
Not quite. You still have to kind of pick your poison after that. This is to kind of hook into the life cycle of what Maui is. So this is kind of where I get the Shiny hosting in. This saves people a lot of the cruft, I want to say, that goes underneath things. So this is kind of like an extra thing that needed to happen, but it's there. It's a minor thing.
So I kind of saw you check those boxes about, the things that you want.
Yep.
Do you have a template that does it?
I do, and that's what I will be showing when we get to some live code, when they start kind of talking about the main background stuff of my talk. But this is where you come. You got an existing project. You're like, look, I don't want to run a template because I've got an existing project. So you can come here, pick out your stuff. It's going to tell you what you need, and you can kind of compare and contrast, right? Because this is the big guy, right? When we get to the Android manifest, you're like, oh my God, what do I need in this thing, right? So, I mean, I make this file. This is just the nature of where we're at in mobile. So at least this way, you have something that you can compare and kind of copy in. There's the Apple manifest as well. If you're getting into kind of push notifications and stuff. There's the Apple info plist, and there's that new thing as of May 1st.
Privacy. Yeah.
This guy is coming, whether you want to do him or not. He's there. So we've even started looking into how we generate that for users. This is a guesstimate at best, so use it with a bit of caution. But it does help you get started, because for the most part, I think Apple's going to be fairly lenient about it for a little while. So that's kind of stuff we're doing out of the box right now on the website.
All right, that's a lot. I did get a little bit of background music going, so
that's
just
right.
keeps things friendly. But that privacy thing is it's important. It's coming pretty quick. May 1st is when Apple is going to try or start making it mandatory. So Gerald wrote up a nice Gerald VSLive wrote up a nice post on the bare minimum that you need if you're using .NET MAUI or Xamarin. But then if you have like other dependencies, you can need to add to that. But it's a thing that everybody has to do, so might as well get on with it now.
Your keyword there is try. We'll see how well that goes for Apple. I think they're going to get a lot of splashback about it, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Anyhow,
so
as you were saying, templates.
I see the promise. How do I get started?
All right. So we do have templates. So if you're just kind of looking to get started, I do have a template. It's listed right here on the front page of our website. You can also get it at the GitHub repository, which I'll link after, or it's right there. So I have this nice little template that I've already gone and installed. Now, this has evolved quite a bit since I started. It's turned into more of a community toolkit template, if that's a thing.
Okay, Alan, the text in here is a little too small. Can you zoom in?
Uh-oh, I lost sound. Hello.
I hear you fine. Yeah, I hear you.
All right, that was interesting. Sorry, go ahead. You were saying something.
Can you bump up the fonts a little bit in Visual Studio?
Unfortunately, this is where it doesn't allow me to bump up fonts because of
Oh,
this
I see. You need
MUI.
to get into the editor. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So you're essentially picking a target framework,
Yep.
and looks like you're choosing all the things that you want.
Yes. So this is again more or less the same thing that we kind of just looked at in the web browser, except this has been more of a community toolkit now, where I'm doing everything from setting up kind of your Maui essentials. If you've got file picker, app actions, media picker, maps, I mean, you
Yep.
name it. This thing has all the third parties that are reasonably popular. I'm still kind of adding it to it as time goes on.
Oh,
Um,
I wanted to ask you. I saw something.
yep.
I think I might be completely mistaken here, but Stephen, I forget his name, had made a library called Rainbow Debug Rainbows.
That's right. That's
Did
it's
I did I see that in Shiny?
Yep, I just added
Okay,
that
yeah,
to this. It won't be shiny again. I'll say it's the community. I'm going to try and get this to be a community template at some
yeah,
point,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it is in here. I
Okay,
recently had a debug rainbows for Maui, so it'll
yeah.
just wire that stuff in for you.
It's pretty nifty. I don't know if folks know. So essentially, it draws color backgrounds behind your UI, because a lot of the times when you're doing XAML, or C sharp, like your layout might not be exactly what you want. So it kind of shows you the border and the fill behind every UI element, so you get to see. And then it also gives you like a not an invisible, but a kind of a visible grid on top of everything, so you can line up things nicely. So that's pretty nifty.
It's a pretty powerful plugin. I think it's going to become pretty popular again. It was very popular in the Xamarin Forum days.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the customers I work with usually have like Figma or something, so I'm
Hmm.
just copying. That's the size you want. Great, 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 and it usually goes in.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
knock on wood.
All right. So you
So
pick the things you want.
you pick the things they want, but for today's topic, I figured, let's talk about the things that are the big deal for Shiny, kind of the big sellers in terms of background. So I'm going to focus. I'm going to do this all in XAML. Mind you, we're not going to look at a lot of UI because again, we're Shiny in the back end, not the front. So I'm going to pick our background jobs. I'm going to pick some GPS. Why not? We'll throw in some GPS or some geofencing. Again, I'm only going to talk about kind of what they do and how they wire in. Background uploads and downloads. This is a big one that people don't use. And there's a few others that we can do background with, but I kind of want to I don't want to focus too much on everything. I just kind of want to pick out these four
Yeah.
dudes,
Yeah.
and we'll add some push notifications. Just
Oh no, that's nice, because I was going to ask you about push. So good to see you adding that.
I'm going to throw in Firebase for now because that's going to be an interesting topic. It's going to be an
Yeah.
interesting topic today. You should watch the .NET community stand up later too about Firebase.
Oh,
Hint, hint, nudge,
is that today as well?
hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Yes, it is
Okay.
later on today.
All
There's
right.
only so much I can talk about, but like, watch it.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to do a test. John isn't flaming me in chat yet, so I haven't done too much.
It is nice that you and John have, kind of restarted Gone Mobile. I forget the name of the guy who used to run it in the past. He's still around, right? What's his name?
Oh, I don't know him personally.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember his name. I apologize. I'm drawing a
Greg
blank.
Shackles. Yes. Thank you,
There
John.
we
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Yeah, I've known Greg for a while. He's a great guy.
All right. So I'm going to just reload this project in a second because Visual Studio in Mac, which I am using today just because it's very easy to present with, doesn't tend to pick up things the
I'll
first time.
I'll
It
tell
is
you
what it
this,
is.
Alan. I'll tell you this. Just to make Maddie happy, I have now built a full-blown Maui app purely in VS Code. Did it hurt? Yes. But
It's the whole
it's there.
experience has some growth to be done, right?
Yeah,
Not so
yeah,
much just Maui, like they just had NuGet packages, right?
yeah.
The ability to
And,
manage them.
and they're working on it. They're working. I mean, they know like
Right.
XAML IntelliSense, hot reload. Those are things we absolutely need. So, they keep giving them feedback that they're working on things.
And that's all I'm looking for. I want the hot reload and XAML IntelliSense. And because for the most part, I manage everything in this guy in my CS proj, which I will open right here. So This is my CS Proj. It is a bit more on steroids than probably what you're used to seeing out of the traditional templates, only because there's a lot more to get accomplished when you start building real apps.
Yeah.
But I tend to manage my NuGets right here.
Yeah.
This is where I'm happy. I'm happy editing files. Maybe I'm old.
Yeah, no, and
Simply the way.
maybe it is an age thing. Like I am perfectly happy just hand coding that thing, so I get to have complete granular control, and I'm happy with my command line as well. So maybe it's an age thing. Oh, John said this week's episode of Gone Mobile, kind of going with the community stand-up. It's on slim bindings. Okay, that's interesting. That is very
Okay, so I didn't
interesting.
give away too much yet. Then he's allowed to pop those things out. I'm not. I'm
Okay.
told not
All
to.
right.
So
Okay. All right. Yeah, this is something very exciting that's happening, especially I think on the Android side. We talked a little bit about this at the MVP Summit. I don't know how much of that is NDA, but I mean, it sure is coming.
it's right now the noise is around Firebase and iOS bindings and stuff, because the
Yep.
iOS bindings from Microsoft haven't been updated in a while. So there's going to be some community involvement there, to getting Firebase iOS back across the line, for people to start kind of serving themselves. So it's coming. I know everybody's screaming at David, but you're not really screaming at the right person, right?
That's true. And actually, I mean, for Shiny, like and Gone Mobile, like these are brands, and you tend to associate people with those brands, and those are the people that you complain to. But a lot of the hard work sometimes happens way behind in the scenes. Like I met up with some Microsoft engineers who are doing the hardcore iOS API mapping layer, and I think like Jonathan does some of that, and John, you do as well. These are the real hardcore people who have to get way down into the depths of documentation and API and figure things out with
Right.
bindings, with whatever it is that you need for whatever APIs that you're using. It's hard work.
Well, and speaking of Xcode or kind of platform evolvements, we've got Xcode that's grown. You've got, so it used to be Carthage or Cartridge, I don't know, whatever their package management is, and then it went to Pods, and now it's Swift Package Manager. So it's like that's always evolving too. So documentation's always behind, right? So when we talk about when slim binding is talked about today or in other talks, right, you're going to see a lot of this. It's just everybody had to catch up and evolve as well, including Microsoft. So, and they're still evolving. So anyhow, to kind of bring up push, if you are a user of push, I have specifically linked Shiny Firebase, because if you're using this now, yes, it's using the old bindings. When the new bindings come out, and they are coming out, you will only need to update your package and it will just work. And it'll work with new Firebase. And then you'll be happy and everybody be happy. Relax. It's a piece of cake.
So
Everything's just going to kind of come out.
when you say push, like you're meaning a true push from Firebase, like not a local
Right.
push, right?
Right. So we're
Yeah.
talking about push notifications. Now everything, and the funny part is that for everybody that gets mad about push notifications and having like Azure push hubs and Firebase, etc., they're all just built on the native anyways, right? So when we talk about like Apple, it's all Apple push notification system, APNS,
Yep.
right? If you're on the Android side, yes, it always has been Firebase, but those bindings have always been updated because they have to be, right? Microsoft has to update those because they need them as well. So really, it's only that iOS equation right now that's missing, and that's about to be plugged. Again, by community, not necessarily by Microsoft. So, kind of going back to what I was talking about here with Shiny, these are really the four. When we talk about backgrounding, there's really kind of four areas, at least in terms of simplicity. Before we start to go out into like stuff like VoIP or hardware or any of the real like deep dive, where good luck ever getting cross-platform, right? If you've written VoIP, you're really not writing an abstraction on it. Like it's not going to happen. You're really going to be writing you can still write it in C#, but you're going to be writing iOS code in C#, right? And vice versa for Android. You're not going to build an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, I'm not sure the juice was worth the squeeze, but go for it. I'm always happy to be proven wrong, because abstractions save us all work if they work right.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, for a lot of those things, you're just, so close to the metal anyways, so you just have to know the native stuff.
right.
And then, I mean, maybe for, your own app or your own enterprise, you can build a shell around it, but you have to know the native stuff for some of
Exactly.
those things. Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's kind of the big play on. So when I start to talk, I'm going to go through each of these plugins anyways, and kind of explain where their pros and cons are. But really, the key part of Shiny is that it kind of keeps. I tend to keep up with all of the changes, especially in the Android world. Right. If you're doing background locations, I think that's changed pretty much every single version since 8 of Android, right? Is it a broadcast service, or is it a broadcast receiver? There we go. Broadcast receiver. Is it an intent service? Is it a foreground service? Do you even know anymore? I sometimes I get lost. So I have templates, by the way, because I keep forgetting what to wire up for these things. I write the code and I still forget, right?
Hmm. Hey,
So,
so quick question here. So you
yep.
started with the template and you chose those things, which is why you see those references. What if I have an existing, Xamarin or .NET or an Uno project, and I just bring in the Shiny NuGet package? Will you still wire up these things?
No. So
Okay.
because there's so much boilerplate, that's why I have the app builder on the website, that you can go to and kind of find
Okay.
some
So
stuff
you just
there.
find the things that you need. Yeah.
Right. And then you can kind of pick and pull stuff over. Now there is some hosting differences, obviously, if you switch to something like Uno, but there's docs to kind of cover what you need to do that.
Yeah.
Eventually, there's going to be an Uno hosting platform, which there'll be a use Shiny and whatever they have for their setup. But that's still kind of to be TBD. We're getting there.
All right.
So, sorry, got another question?
No, no. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So we're going to talk about kind of the 4 areas. Like I said, the easier to win background kind of stuff. So the first one people I tend to see is the locations, right? You want a GPS background, etc. So we've got our package registered. I'm not going to go through the mass amount of boilerplate because most of that's been covered by the template, right? But we'll go into Maui and we'll see how Maui has it registered here. So we got our use Maui up, or our use Shiny framework. See, I picked the wrong thing, but this is use Shiny under the hood. This is kind of a helper to get Prism and Shiny and all that other stuff working together. For those that don't know what Prism is, it's a better version of Shell. That's what I'll say. Sorry, John. I love you guys, but you
Oh
know
boy.
where I am. I guess
So yeah, Prism is a popular, MVVM library, that Dan and Alan and other folks maintain, Brian and other folks have maintained. And just for context, like the shell is how a .NET MAUI app kind of starts off. You're not forced into using it. If you don't want it, you can have roll your own, have your own nav and your own stack.
I
And
had to drop something controversial for you, so you can bleep that out later if you want.
it's all good.
Um,
We're friends.
So here we are. We've got our little GPS. So this is I'm not gonna go bothering how to run this, but basically there is a GPS manager. You can start and set all your parameters on. But basically the core amount of work happens here. So we add our GPS stuff. We're gonna go have a look at this guy. So this is our GPS delegate. So one of the things Shiny doesn't do is events, right? So if you're familiar with .NET events, they seem convenient. The problem is, one, they tend to leak memory. Two, how the heck do I get my infrastructure to it? And three, how do I test it? Right. So that's kind of some of the problems that happen. And again, going back to kind of the plugin era, it was like, where do we wire these things in? Right. If I have an event, if I hook it in the main activity in Android, it's often too late. You've already missed the event, right? So there was hacks we used to do, like, okay, well, we'll wait to throw the event until the event is hooked, and then we'll toss the event. But it was weird, right? And people didn't like it. And then they'd be like, well, my SQLite database isn't working with it, etc. So it was a rough time, right? So that's what Shiny tries to break, is that mold, right? It's, I guess people call it opinionated, but in a way it is, but it fits in kind of the box with Maui now and the way dependency injection works. So if you've got a database or you've got a logging, for instance, you can see I've got a logger coming in here. You can inject your services in here using standard DI principles, and this thing's just going to work, right? You don't have to worry about where the event got hooked, what permissions, etc., because all of that would have been handled. All you got to do here now is decide how you're going to work with that GPS reading, right? So if we've got a reading here, this thing's going to have your altitude, maybe your heading, if that's coming out. It's going to have your lat and long, right? Very comfortable place to work. And it's all async, right? So you don't even need to worry about keeping, Android alive and knowing that it has to wait for you to finish your work, because it didn't used to. It'd just be like, you're done. Same with iOS. You've got a certain amount of time and to get things done, but it's there and it's comfortable. You don't have to know how the platforms are doing this necessarily. If you do need to get into the platform, so again, we were talking about, what is it? Is it a foreground service? Is it a background service? So kind of as we go to Android, sometimes you want a little bit of extra control over it. So Shiny does have that if you want to configure your notification a little bit more to say, hey, user, we're tracking you from here to Kingdom Come. We know you don't like your battery, so you can put stuff like that into the notification here so that Android sees it front and center. And this is something you have to do. You can't get around it. So you may as well make the notification fun if you can. So that's here.
Yeah.
It's wrapped in a nice little if Android.
Mm-hmm.
If I select this to be Android, there we go. See, it lights up.
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
And like, since this is background GPS stuff, like, do you have documentation on what permissions people need to put in?
I do. Again, the app builder and the template will get a lot of that, but for the most part, everything kind of starts and ends. So I'm going to inject my GPS manager here. So this is kind of the guy that you decide how everything's going to work. As soon as you start the listener, because it doesn't start automatically, you have to set up when you want it to start, when you want it to end.
Mm-hmm.
This is when it'll ask the permissions, right? So it'll do it all that stuff out of the box for you. You just don't need to worry about it. If you're missing something, this guy's going to toss an exception. So you get that at dev time, right? When you're building this project, it'll be like, listen, you didn't use the builder. It told you to put these things in. It told you to put these, 10 things in your manifest. Sorry, I can't do it for you. There's things I'd like to do for you. But we just can't. It is boilerplate. Let's live with it and move on, right? So again, very easy to work with, very comfortable. You can do your things here. Now, a lot of people, when they start using GPS in the background, if you've done work with Android, they do have a background permission. The problem is it's very misunderstood how that works, right? You might get like 3 or 4 pings in an hour. And let's face it, that's not really great for an end user experience, right? If you're tracking where your fleet is or where your employee is because you're package delivering or something, it just doesn't work. There's also geofences, but again, that's contextual and it doesn't work. It's not enough. So what people tend to do is they want to have this GPS hot all the time, right? Just pinging away. So you can do stuff like that here. The problem is, again, you're really going to rip into your user's battery. So, it's a background experience. Be careful. If you like your users and it's not functional to your app, don't track them in real time. I don't care if you know where I am, but I do like my battery, and I don't want to get a new iPhone every year because my battery's toast, right? So it's there. You can do it. Just make sure your business has a requirement for it. So that's when GPS is good and bad.
Yeah.
Use it where you need it. Don't use it just because. Also, if you are using it just because, you have to sacrifice, your firstborn or some blood to Apple to get this through into the store. It's factual.
Yeah.
Even Android now is starting to kind of crack down on this. So, buyer beware. Make sure you have a need for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so quick question here. So if you're doing this in the background and something happens, like, do you have triggers to bring all of this to the foreground, like when the app needs to come back?
There's ways to monitor it. So first of all, the GPS is going to automatically start. So if you start GPS and for some reason, hey, your app crashes or the user swipes it away, this thing's going to get itself going again. So I usually do it on device reboots.
Yep.
It'll say, oh, it restarted. You don't want to have to write this code to say, does the user still have permission, start service with these permissions, etc. This thing will just resume itself from where it left off. So that's another big, powerful thing because people don't realize that on Android, you have to do that. iOS is a little bit smarter. It will kind of get things going again. but Android doesn't. So you have to have those things in place. So Shiny will do that automatically. You don't have to worry about it.
All right.
Good.
And once you're in there reading, once you drop the GPS manager, reading lat, long, heading, all of that is pretty obvious.
Yes, it's just you got all the data there. That's what you've got. You know, do what you're going to do with it, and be quick. Now, I wouldn't suggest sending if you're doing this in real time. There is ways you want to throttle it because this data can come in really fast, like every second. So you probably don't want to call an HTTP service every second. Again, if you don't like your users, go for it. If you do like your users, go easy. Go easy. Another good one though is the geofencing. So Shiny also has a geofence. This is a little bit better for your, hey, you're entering a state, maybe you want to slow down. That's where I've kind of used it, right? This is the official speed limits. Maybe you just want to say, hey, you're near a store. We've got a deal. Come on in, right? So it's a bit more contextual. It's not precise in the nature of, when it's going to fire. It's kind of a guesstimate, right? So it'll tell you, the platform will tell you roughly when they entered, not where they entered the gate. So you don't know if they're coming from north, south, east, west, but it'll tell you, hey, they're in the vicinity. Do something, whatever that may be. Another good one is your delivery is about to arrive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess the Ubers like that, right? But it's here, right? So it's a bit more contextual. The challenges here are, again, it's going to be off. It's not instantaneous. It's you only get so many geofences, right? So Android gives you 60, which is crazy, and iOS gives you 20, which is crazy on the other spectrum, right? So you can only have 20 geofences, and a lot of people might start out thinking, oh, that's plenty. But if you're a big business, like movie theaters, for example, I know there's a movie theater here that bugs me every time I drop by it. Sorry, your notifications are turned off, so I won't say the brand. But every time I drive by it, it used to send me a notification. It's like, I don't want to watch a movie today. I'm old. I don't need to go to a movie theater once a week. But that's kind of some of the things you can do. But think about
so
20 geofences.
The 20 adds up quickly.
You're right. So 20 geofences, for a big movie theater conglomerate, probably not going to do it. So you got to pick that poison.
Yeah.
Clearly,
how do you? No, sorry. I was going to ask, how do you define the regions, like the boundaries?
So that's the same thing. I'm going to do it here. You can do a geofence manager. Again, this is documented. I kind of wanted to show more of the managers, just so we can, or the delegates, so we can understand what's working. But I guess wiring these up is pretty good too, right? So we can do start monitoring, right? And this again will do all the permissions as long as you've wired them up using either the template or the app builder, or you're smart, you know what it needs. And then here we can say, so we need to give it an identifier so we know what it is. So this would be my geofence, for example. We're going to say our center point is.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't know about you. Do you have your Latin long memorized?
No.
I sure as heck don't. And then I'm going to say I want the distance to be roughly, and this is for all the Americans. I don't know miles, so I want the fence to be roughly, let's say 2 miles, right? Okay. So again, it's a guesstimate. You could be 1.5 miles when it fires in the fence. You could be 1.5 miles out of the fence when it fires.
So it's always, starting from a center point with the radius. Like
right. And the radius is kind of a helper. It's not a precision. Sure. So deal with it, right? But what this is going to do is it's going to decide, okay, that's roughly the fence you want. When the user enters that, we will tell you, right? So we'll say your new status is going to be equal to entered or exited,
gotcha.
right? And you'll have you'll have the region that you set. So you'll have your center point, you'll have your name, what do they call it? Identifier. There we go. Right. So you'll be able to tell, okay, well, they got into the preferred theater. Let's drop Alan the 500th local notification so he knows that he can come to the theater anytime he wants.
Yeah.
Again, contextual.
Yeah.
What you need. And it's pretty easy. I'll go back to our little Maui program. And this is how we again, I set up geofencing. This puts your geofence manager into your dependency injection. and this added the delegate for how it's going to be managed. Pretty easy, not much to it. Again, permissions and all that great stuff managed. Questions?
Yes. Yes, you can take it. It's spring break time, so kiddo is home. He's looking for a piece of printer paper so he can color it. Yeah, go for it.
You need a red light on your door.
Yeah, there is one, but he knows when to knock. When it's an urgency, or like needing a paper.
Fair enough.
One quick question: like if you start a geofence monitor, I mean, it's going to keep on going until you stop it, right?
There is ways to say, so there's a lot more features out of the gate. I'm just covering kind of the basics, but if I started a geofence, there is ways to say, I want it to be a single use. You can't see that there, but there is a flag. See, that thing won't go big. The rest of the font's big. The IntelliSense is not big. So you can say single use.
Yeah.
If it just you want it to fire once and go away, you can have it notify you only if it's on entry or only if it's on exit. So there's options, right? It's all there if you want to play with it. I usually just, I don't know, call me lazy, but I usually just register the geofence and then I'll decide how I'm going to deal with it in code.
Yeah.
I find product managers keep changing that up on me anyways, so it's better just to have it open and then deal with it. But pick your poison. It'll do it for you.
Yep. All right, that's pretty sweet. So we talked about geofencing. We talked about location, GPS.
And geofencing, really easy on battery, really friendly on battery. But again, very limited in what you're going to do. You're not going to use it for tracking a fleet. So decide what works for your business.
Right. Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to go into was jobs. Now, jobs are actually fairly simple. The concept obviously is, I've got some work I want to run roughly every, let's say, half hour. Now, the thing I like to state about jobs is they are periodic. They are not scheduled. There's a big difference in that. Scheduled meaning I know this thing's going to run on a timer. Sure, no. Doesn't exist like that. Even on Android, some would say it's kind of there, but it's not, right? So if the battery's limited or maybe the user's using other apps, it's not going to run, right? It's the OS is going to limit your app from doing these things. And when we go onto the iOS side, it's even more kind of convoluted. So iOS does it actually intelligently. iOS is a better platform for this. No offense. iOS is very smart in how it does it. So if it knows the best I have is I go on a train when I go downtown here. So it's super intelligent because it knows I'm going to use the app before I get just downtown, right? So, and it also knows that I'm going to lose internet just at a small part there. And it's funny, I've tested this. iOS is so smart that it goes, this is a dead gap that we're about to hit. Go run the background job now to pull data so that Alan can look at it the second he's getting in the dead spot, because that's when I tended to use it. It was so intelligent about it that it's crazy. And they don't document it. They don't talk about it. This is strictly from my own testing. And I was like, that's pretty cool. It knows when I want to use the app. It knows when the app is going to be missing stuff that it needs. So it's going to be smart about it. It's fantastic, right? That's battery efficiency right there.
No, just to kind of dive into the periodic versus scheduled thing. So you're saying I cannot run a job every Monday at noon?
No, it does not. There's ways you can guess that it's going to run there, but jobs are good for when you've got let's say I want to periodically pull data, right? Maybe I want to clean up a database. Maybe I want to just call home to say, this user's still logged in. This device is still active, right? It's very good at doing those things. But let's say I wanted to do a scheduled thing like a notification, right? Like happy birthday, because, let's face it, I'm over my 40s. I don't necessarily know what day it is anymore. It's not a bad thing to have, right? I want it to remind me that it is indeed my birthday. I don't even know what date it is today. It's April something. I know that much, right? So that's where a job or a scheduled notification is more appropriate. And that's more alarm-based. So Shiny does have that, but jobs are not appropriate for that.
Gotcha.
Right. So you're able to set a scheduled job, a scheduled notification, and the platform will do that for you.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if you absolutely have to have something done at a specific point, like do a push trigger, and then your app can trigger something that
Oh,
needs to be done at a
Sam's
specific time.
jumping ahead of me. Yeah, we'll get to that one. We're going to
Okay.
talk about push because there's plus and minuses to that as well.
And
So
Alan,
yep.
I'm sorry, but we have about 10 minutes because there's a release stream right after us.
Okay, so I'm burning some time here. No worries. So here it is registering our job. You can do stuff like filtering this job only runs when internet's available. If my keyboard's going to work here. So you can do stuff like say, I only want this job to run if the device is charging, if my my connectivity's there, and other such things like that. Maybe you because obviously if you need internet connectivity, you don't really want your job to run. You don't want to have to inject a service to deal with it. So it'll deal with that out of the box for you. So there's lots of values there you can do. There's also the process of running this job in the foreground. So if your app is hot, like on the screen, there's a timer that'll run your job every 30 seconds if
Oh,
you want to do
nice.
that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to push notifications since you brought that up. That's a good one to talk about. So push and Shiny, there's not really a lot to push, to be honest. Push is pretty small overall on the client. Okay, so the reason I generally say push is great. You can do those real things like reminding me it is my birthday, and it all sounds great. And again, being not a lot of code on the client is great. It's the back end where you get a lot of code, right?
Always.
So
Mm-hmm.
Shiny's kind of main sell here is it's able to deal with all those things like registering, uh, receiving the background pushes, getting new tokens, dealing with the entry, like when a user taps on the notification, and it abstracts away. Like if you used App Center a couple of years ago, they had push notification.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had a good friend of mine who was using App Center. He's like, dude, I got to switch this out again. Abstracting these things is hard, which is actually why I ended up writing this because he was right.
Yeah.
This sucks. We keep
And it
changing
takes a
notifications.
lot of time to go through APNS and understand all the nuances of where to plug in, where to wire things up.
Right. So this makes it easy now. You can basically, so if I go back, so here's our push delegate. There's not, again, pretty self-understanding what it does. I won't go into it too much. There is documentation. There's some code comments about what to do, etc. But really here is the benefit is that your push delegate is always going to work the same. You're always going to be injecting your push managers to request access, and it's going to give you a token. But I can change my push mechanism with one line of code. So if I wanted to switch this to pure native, I would just use add push, right? If I wanted to use Azure Notification Hubs, which I also have a mechanism for, you can install that package and configure Azure Notification Hubs. You don't have to change any of the rest of your code, just this line. So that's
Interesting.
pretty powerful.
So when you say add push and it's native, so you can behind the scenes you can do both APMS and the Android thing. What's it called?
Firebase.
Firebase.
Yep.
Okay.
If you wanted to set that up, because some people don't want to use strictly Firebase or strictly Azure Notification Hubs.
Mm-hmm.
But really they're built on the native mechanisms. So again, you can switch your implementations up however you want. And it's one line of code change here.
Nice. Very nice.
So that's kind of the sell there in terms of why you might want to use it. Again, for the Firebase users out there, I do support the iOS. So the benefit there is that when I update to our new bindings, which are coming, you'll just have to update the package. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. It's just going to work, which I think that's pretty fantastic. I don't like changing code. I like deleting code.
Yeah.
The last one I wanted to quickly go over is, and this is one that people generally tend to gloss over, so I'll go quick for you, is the HTTP transfers. So what this is if you take a picture, you generally want to make sure that that's going to get through, right? So a lot of people think that Poly can do it, right? So I can use Poly to retry and resend. The problem is that when your app goes to the background, if you've got an HTTP client that's sending data, it gets trimmed. If you've got an HTTP client that's pulling data, so if you're pulling like a 20 gig or 20 meg file and your app goes to the background, you got about 4 seconds before it goes, yeah, that's done, right? So you don't know that your image failed. It just kind of went to sleep and died, right? So Android has kind of a plugin built in to do that. iOS definitely does. So they have ways to, okay, connectivity's back, start downloading the file. Okay, connectivity's gone. Stop. Right.
Would it do that if your app is in the background?
Yes, it'll automatically deal
Okay.
with it. So it's something. It's not a job. It's just kind of something that's built into the platform to see, oh, connectivity's there. Start pushing or pulling the file. Right. And a lot of people don't do this, and they don't realize that their upload or download failed, and it just kind of evaporates. Right. You couldn't trap an error because there was no error. Your app simply died. So this is another good one that I suggest people do if you're pushing images or files around. It's something you need, and you don't realize until you get there that it is something you need.
Yeah.
So it's another one where it's a gap. Kind of with Maui. Maui doesn't deal with this stuff. Obviously, it's UI, but this is something that Shiny does supply out of the box if you need.
And so this one here gives you like an uncompleted, and
Nope, let
what
me
was
go
the other
back to
thing?
that for you. So this gives you if
On
the
error. Okay.
download completed. Again, it's uploads or downloads, so you can check what it's downloading. You give it an identifier just the same as you do like a geofence. And then if it really errored, so let's say your server decided like that file's too big, I don't like it, it's got a virus, because you should be probably virus checking stuff that's being uploaded. I don't know. I wouldn't trust me. I don't trust me. So, you want to know about those things. And that, like I said, if you do it through an HTTP client and the app goes to sleep on you, you don't know that it failed. Your server does, but you don't.
So, I mean, do you use HTTP clients anymore since you have this, or do you always, go to this?
Yes, I still use HTTP clients because data is different, right? It's going to pass or
Oh, so it's
fail.
the files, okay, that you
This
want to use
is
this
the
for.
bigger transfers like images. I don't know. I've transferred a whole whack of things out here, but it's big stuff, right?
Yeah.
The little stuff is more or less you can tell if it passed or failed, right? You're going to get, if your server isn't able to save a single record inside of 4 seconds, you probably want to reevaluate what you're doing on the server side. Just saying, right? Just saying.
Yeah.
It's the thought.
Okay. Yeah. All right, and that's pretty easy. There's a HTTP transfer delegate as well, and I'm guessing that request has all the things you need.
Right. So it's got the HTTP transfer manager. You can go in here, inject it into your view model wherever you want, and you can start requesting. Where is it here?
I like your consistency as well. Like everything is a manager, and then you get all the things off that manager.
Right. And it's all there. You can track your metrics on how it's uploading, downloading, whatever you need to do. This one works a little bit better with the foreground if you needed to. But that's what I wanted to cover was more the background processes and how Shiny manages it.
Yeah. This is good stuff. Foolish Navel, I'm kind of used to APIs taking a few seconds to create a customer. Yeah. Hopefully it's not too long. Like Alan's saying, our servers need to be quick because user attention and mobile apps don't last forever. So things, context switches are very, very quick. So
hopefully you've got a loader, so I know that I have to wait a second, because if you don't have a loader, and I'm just going to swipe away the app. Plus, we're impatient. Just be done. Just be done.
Yeah, that's what mobile and social media has done. We are all impatient.
Exactly.
Oh no, some APIs takes minutes. You're hitting a server in Germany. Yeah, it's not my API. All right, let the chat wars begin here. It's not my API.
I just like to stir it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alan, thank you for coming on. I'm going to bring your desktop down first up for maintaining Shiny for the years that you have, and coming on the show and always showing off new and cool things. We appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you. John as well, and everybody in the chat room. We appreciate you hanging out with us. If you're building .NET apps and you need things to be cross-platform and do heavy-hitting things in the background, you know where to go look. Go look at Shiny. I will see you on the next stream. So be well, and we'll see you around. All right.